You do not get to call me selfish for choosing to see my doctor. Those were the words my son, Brandon, said to me. It felt like a punch to the chest. He acted as if my cataract surgery, a procedure I had waited 8 months for, was some kind of personal attack on his vacation plans. I have spent 34 years being his safety net. I figured out how to raise him alone. I figured out how to pay for his college. I even gave him $82,000 over the last 8 years to help his family stay afloat. But the moment I chose my own health over his free childcare, everything changed. He did not just get angry. He changed the locks on his front door. He locked me out of the very same house I helped him buy. Before I tell you about the shocking discovery I made at the bank and the heartbreaking choice I had to make at my lawyer's office, let us take a moment to connect. I would love to know who is joining us today. Please, leave a comment and tell me which city and state you are watching from. It truly warms my heart to see our community growing. Note: while this story is crafted for storytelling purposes, the message and the lesson it conveys are real and valuable. March in North Carolina is a strange time of year. It is that kind of heavy, grey afternoon when the sky feels low, and you start to wonder if winter will ever actually leave. I had just finished making a pot of lentil soup. The steam was rising from the bowl in little clouds, and I was about to sit down at the kitchen table with my crossword puzzle. It was a Tuesday. Just a quiet, ordinary Tuesday. That was when my phone started to buzz on the granite counter. Brandon, my son. I hesitated for a second before answering. Brandon does not usually call just to chat. He usually has a reason, a plan, or a request. When I picked up, his voice was tight. I knew that tone immediately. It was the tone he used when he had already decided how the conversation was going to go. "Hey, Mom," he said. "Listen, Sarah and I have been talking. We found this incredible deal for Cabo. It is an all-inclusive resort. 14 days, 2 full weeks at the end of April. We really need this break. We are just so burnt out. We thought the boys could stay with you." I set my spoon down. My heart sank just a little. I knew I had to be very careful with my next words. "Brandon," I said softly, "I told you back in February. My surgery is scheduled for April 22nd. There was a silence on the other end of the line. A long, heavy silence. I could hear him breathing. Then he spoke again. "Right. But Mom, that is just 1 day. It is just a routine procedure." "No," I replied. I made sure to speak clearly and firmly. "The procedure is only 1 day, but the recovery is at least 2 weeks. I will not be able to drive. I will not be able to see properly to read my medications. I certainly cannot be responsible for Jackson and Leo on my own. Jackson is 5, and Leo is only 2. They are full of energy. I cannot chase after them in this house while my eyes are healing. Jackson. My sweet Jackson who loves his toy trucks. Leo. My little Leo who has just started running everywhere. I love them more than life itself, but I knew my limits." Brandon's voice shifted. It became harder, less like a son, and more like a stranger. "Mom, we have been planning this for months. We need this vacation for our marriage. And I booked that surgery 8 months ago," I reminded him. "I have been on the waiting list at the Duke Eye Center since last October. You knew about this, Brandon. We talked about it at Christmas." Then came the sentence that stayed with me, the sentence that felt like ice in my chest. "I just think if you really wanted to be there for us, you would figure it out," he said. "That is what family does. They figure it out." I sat there in my quiet kitchen. I looked at the soup getting cold in the bowl. I have been figuring it out for 34 years. I figured out how to raise him alone after his father left when Brandon was only 4 years old. I figured out how to work 2 jobs. I figured out school pickups, little league registrations, and college application fees. I have spent my whole life being his backup plan, his safety net. I told him I was sorry. I told him I could not reschedule again. I had already pushed it back once in the fall when Leo had that health scare, and they needed me to fly up and help. He did not say goodbye. He just hung up. I sat in the silence of my house, and I felt a strange chill that had nothing to do with the weather outside. I knew, right then, that things were about to change. I sat at my kitchen table for a long time after Brandon hung up the phone. The house was so quiet that I could hear the hum of the refrigerator. I looked at my hands. They were shaking, just a little. I kept thinking about that word he used, sacrifice. He said that family was about sacrifice, but in his mind, it seemed that the sacrifice was always supposed to come from me. 40 minutes later, the silence was broken by the familiar chime of a text message. I picked up the phone, expecting to see Brandon's name, but it was not from him. It was from Sarah, my daughter-in-law. That told me everything I needed to know. Brandon did not want to speak to me directly. He was using Sarah to deliver the blow. I read the words on the screen. My eyes blurred as I tried to focus. She wrote, "Evelyn, we have decided it is best if you take some space from the family for a while. The boys have been confused by the tension. Brandon needs time to process everything. Please do not plan to come by for the foreseeable future. Take some space." The phrase felt like a heavy stone in my stomach. I was 68 years old. I lived alone in a house that felt bigger every year. I did not need more space. I needed my family. I had never forced myself on them. I only went where I was invited. I only helped when I was asked. And yet, because I refused to cancel a necessary medical procedure, I was being treated like a stranger. I did not sleep well that night. I kept seeing the faces of my grandsons. Jackson. Leo. I thought about the way Leo smells like baby shampoo. I thought about the way Jackson holds my hand when we cross the street. Would they really keep them from me? Over a vacation? The next morning, I could not help myself. I got into my car and drove to their house in Cary. It is a beautiful neighborhood. Quiet streets, tall pine trees, the kind of place where you feel safe. I had helped them buy that house. I felt a sense of pride every time I turned onto their street. I parked across the street and looked at the front door. The lights were on inside. I saw Jackson's little red tricycle tipped over on the front walk. It looked lonely. I walked up to the porch, my heart pounding against my ribs. I rang the doorbell. I waited. I heard movement inside. I heard the sound of small feet running. Then, a muffled voice. It was Sarah. She was whispering to the boys, telling them to stay back. No one came to the door. I rang the bell again, still nothing. I reached into my purse and pulled out my key. Brandon had given it to me 3 years ago. He told me I was always welcome. He told me it was my home too. I slid the key into the lock. I tried to turn it. It would not move. I pulled it out and looked at it. I tried again. I jiggled the handle. I pushed against the door. But the lock was different. The cylinder was new. They had changed the locks. I stood there on the porch in the cold March air. I felt a strange, hollow quiet inside me. It was not anger. Not yet. It was just a profound sense of emptiness, like the sound of a room after the last piece of furniture has been taken away. I walked back to my car. Slowly. I looked at my hands on the steering wheel. I realized then that the space they wanted was not for them. It was a prison they were building around me. When I got home, I did not go to the kitchen. I went straight to the spare bedroom. It is the room where I keep my old desk and a pale green metal filing cabinet. It is the oldest thing in the house. I have always been organized. 31 years of teaching 4th and 5th grade will do that to you. You learn to keep records. You learn that facts matter. I opened the bottom drawer. It creaked. A long, protesting sound. I pulled out a thick folder, marked Family Financial. I took it to the kitchen table and sat down. I began to spread the papers out. The first entry was from April 2017. $25,000. It was a transfer from my 401k plan. Brandon and Sarah were buying a house in Cary. They were short on the down payment. Brandon had looked me in the eye and said it was a loan. He said he would pay me back as soon as their renovation loan cleared. I wrote a note at the bottom of the page. Did not ask for a timeline. I turned the page. August 2018. $4,000. Sarah wanted to go back to work, and they found a spot at a prestigious Montessori school. They needed the deposit immediately. Could I help? Just this once? Of course. I said yes. I kept reading. $2,500 in the spring of 2019. Brandon was between contracts. He called it a bridge loan. He promised he would have the commission by June. June came and went. The money stayed in his account. Then came the pandemic years. There were so many smaller amounts. $500 for groceries, $700 for an unexpected car repair, $300 for winter coats for the boys. I never said no. I felt like it was my job to keep them safe. In September 2021, we started the monthly transfers. Brandon suggested it himself. He called it a family contribution, $600 every single month. I looked at the bank statements. I saw the money leaving my savings and entering theirs. I took a piece of paper and a pen. I started to add it all up. I had to do the math twice because I could not believe the number. In 8 years, I had given them over $82,000. That did not even count the things you cannot put a price on. It did not count the thousands of hours of free childcare. It did not count the birthday parties I hosted, the Christmas gifts, the gas I spent driving back and forth to their house. I sat back in my chair. Outside, the streetlights flickered on. I thought about the text message from Sarah. Take some space. I thought about the new locks on the door. I had been their bank. I had been their safety net. I had been their servant. And the very first time I set a boundary, the very first time I said I needed to take care of my own health, they shut me out. I realized then that I had made a terrible mistake. I had taught my son that my love was a resource he could harvest, rather than a relationship he needed to nurture. I closed the folder. The weight of it felt different now. It did not feel like a record of my generosity. It felt like a record of my own disappearance. I picked up the phone. It was time to call my sister, Martha. I needed to hear the voice of someone who did not want anything from me except my company. I did not call Brandon back. I did not text Sarah. Instead, I picked up the phone and called my sister, Martha. She lives in a quiet town in Virginia. We have talked every Sunday for as long as I can remember. But that night, I called her on a Tuesday. She picked up before the second ring. Evelyn, she said. Her voice was warm and familiar. I was just thinking about you. Is everything all right? I told her everything. I told her about the eye surgery. I told her about the Cabo trip. I told her about the text message and the locks on the door. Martha was quiet for a long time. I could hear her drinking tea on the other end. Then she spoke. Her voice was more serious than I had ever heard it. Evelyn, she said. Are you sitting down? I am always sitting down, Martha, I replied. I am 68 years old. Good, she said. Because I need you to listen to me. You need to call a financial advisor. First thing tomorrow morning. I was confused. I was thinking about my heart and my family. Martha was thinking about my bank account. She asked me a question that stopped me cold. Evelyn, how long has Brandon been listed as your power of attorney? I thought back. 5 years ago, after my husband passed away, I had updated everything. Brandon was the obvious choice. He was my only son. He was organized. He lived nearby. I had given him the legal authority to act on my behalf if I ever became incapacitated. 5 years, I whispered. And in those 5 years, Martha asked, have you reviewed your accounts? All of them? I had not. I trusted him. He was my son. I had raised him, to be honest. But the next morning, I was at the bank when they opened. My advisor, a calm woman named Diane, pulled up my records. We sat in a small office with glass walls. She went through the statements systematically. That was when I saw it. 3 months ago, a line of credit that I had forgotten I even had been accessed. The amount was not millions, but it was significant to me. $4,500. I had not authorized it. I had not signed any paperwork. Diane explained it very carefully. She used phrases like unauthorized access and outside the intended scope. She told me that Brandon, using his power of attorney status, had signed for it. I sat there in that leather chair, and I felt the floor shift beneath me. It was not just the money. It was the deception. He had waited for me to be vulnerable, and then he had reached into my life without asking. He had taken $4,500 while I was still paying for his son's school fees. I want to revoke the power of attorney immediately, I told Diane. My voice did not shake this time. We can flag it here today, she said. But you will need a lawyer to make it official. I walked out of the bank into the cold morning air. My heart was heavy, but my mind was clear. The space Brandon wanted me to take was not about the boys being confused. It was about him being afraid. He was afraid I would see. And now, thanks to my sister, I was seeing everything very clearly. The drive to downtown Raleigh was quiet. I watched the city wake up. People were rushing to work. Students were walking to classes. Everyone was busy with their own lives. I felt like I was waking up, too. For 34 years, I had been a mother first, a teacher second, a person last. That was about to change. I arrived at the office of Eleanor Vance. She had been my family lawyer for decades. She had handled my husband's estate. She was a woman who valued precision. She met me at the door with a firm handshake. "Evelyn," she said, "it is good to see you. How can I help you today?" I sat down in her office. It smelled like old paper and expensive coffee. I did not waste any time. "Eleanor, I need to revoke my power of attorney, and I need to rewrite my will. Completely." Eleanor did not look surprised. She had seen everything in her long career. She just leaned back and listened. I told her about the $4,500. I told her about the changed locks. I told her that I was done being a safety net for someone who did not respect the rope. We spent 2 hours going through the documents. We drafted the revocation of the power of attorney. That was the first step. Brandon would no longer have any legal right to touch my accounts. Then, we moved to the will. Until that morning, my will left everything to Brandon. My house, my savings, my retirement accounts, everything I had worked 31 years for. "Who would you like to list as your primary beneficiary?" Eleanor asked. I thought about my niece, Claire. She is Martha's daughter. She lives in Boston. She is 39 years old and a nurse. 2 years ago, when I had a bad bout of pneumonia, Claire did not wait for me to ask. She took a week of vacation time, flew down to North Carolina, and slept on my sofa. She made me tea. She made sure I took my medicine. She never once asked me for a dime. "Claire," I said. "I want everything to go to Claire, in trust for the boys, Jackson and Leo, for their education. But nothing goes to Brandon or Sarah." Eleanor nodded. She typed quickly. The sound of the keys was like a rhythmic drum. I also gave a final instruction. I wanted the monthly transfers to Brandon's account to stop. Effective immediately. The $600 a month for the Montessori school, the extra money for emergencies, all of it. When it was time to sign, my hand was steady. I signed my name 7 times. 7 signatures to reclaim my life. 7 signatures to set a boundary that should have been there years ago. As I walked out of Eleanor's office, I felt a strange lightness. It was the lightness of a decision that had already been made. I was no longer waiting for Brandon to change. I had changed instead. I was home for only an hour when the phone rang. It was Brandon. He sounded different. He did not sound angry anymore. He sounded panicked. "Mom," he said, "there is a problem with the account. The transfer did not come through." I sat down in my armchair. I looked out at the garden. "I know, Brandon," I said. "I cancelled it." I sat at the kitchen table with my phone face down. The house was quiet. A different kind of quiet than I was used to. Usually, the silence felt like a companion, but that afternoon, it felt like the breath you take right before a storm hits. I knew the phone would ring. I knew the moment the bank processed those changes, the life Brandon had built on my back would start to wobble. When it finally happened, the vibration of the phone on the wooden table sounded like a jackhammer. I let it ring. 1, 2, 3, 4 times. Then, I picked it up. "Mom!" Brandon's voice was high. It was the sound of a man who had just looked at his bank balance and saw a hole where there used to be a flaw. "Mom, I am at the bank." Or, "I was just looking at the app. The $600 for the school. It did not go through. And the automated transfer for the car loan. It was declined." I took a slow breath. I looked at my garden through the window. The roses were just starting to show their first tiny buds. "I know, Brandon," I said. My voice was calm. "I went to the bank yesterday. I closed those transfers." "What do you mean you closed them?" He sounded panicked now. "Mom, the Montessori fees are due by Friday. If we do not pay, Jackson loses his spot. You know how hard it was to get him in there. And the car. Sarah needs that car to get to work." It was the same old song. The boys. Sarah's job. The emergency. He was trying to make his problems my responsibility. He was trying to make me feel the weight of his life, but for the first time, I refused to carry it. "Brandon," I said, "we need to talk about the $4,500. The silence on the other end was absolute. It was the silence of a person who had been caught. I waited. I was a teacher for 31 years. I know how to wait out a student who is trying to think of a lie. I did not think you would notice that," he said finally. His voice had dropped an octave. It was low and defensive. "It was an emergency, Mom." Truly, Sarah's transmission went out. We did not have the cash. And I figured, since I am the power of attorney, it was okay. "I was going to tell you. I was just waiting for the right time." "The right time was before you signed my name," I replied. "You took that money from my line of credit without a word, and then, less than a month later, you told me to take some space from the family. You told me I was selfish for wanting my eye surgery. You wanted my money, but you did not want me." "That is not true," he protested. But the words sounded weak. "It is true," I said. "I have spent 34 years figuring it out for you. I figured out how to keep us afloat after your father left. I figured out how to get you through college. I have given you $82,000 in the last 8 years. I did those things because I love you, but I realize now that my help has become a crutch, and that crutch is breaking me. Mom, please, we are stretched so thin. We cannot survive this month without that money." "Then you will have to do what I did when you were small," I said. "You will have to find a second job. You will have to cut back. You will have to figure it out. I love you, and I love Jackson and Leo, but I cannot be your emergency fund and your backup plan only when it suits you. I am taking the space you asked for, but I am taking my financial life with me." I did not wait for him to respond. I ended the call. I felt a strange mix of terror and triumph. It was the hardest thing I had ever done. But as I sat there, I realized that the sky had not fallen. The world was still turning, and for the first time in a very long time, I felt like I could breathe. The next few days were strange. No one called. No one texted. The space was now official. I went about my routine. I made my tea. I worked in my garden. I prepared for my surgery. But there was a hollowness in my chest that I could not quite shake. On Saturday morning, there was a knock at the door. I was not expecting anyone. When I opened it, I saw Barb. Barb and I taught together at the same elementary school for over 20 years. She retired a year before I did. She was standing there with a bag from the local bakery. The one that makes those cinnamon rolls I love. Martha called me, Barb said as she walked inside. She did not ask permission. That is just how Barb is. She headed straight for the kitchen and started making a pot of coffee. She told me you were going through it. So, I brought sugar and caffeine. Talk to me, Evelyn. We sat at the kitchen table. The morning sun was streaming in, hitting the white tiles. I told her everything. I told her about the money, the surgery, the locks, and the phone call with Brandon. Barb listened without interrupting. She just nodded, her eyes kind, but sharp. When I finished, she took a long sip of her coffee. You know what your problem is, Evelyn? She asked. I have a feeling you are going to tell me, I said with a small smile. You made it too easy, Barb said. She did not sugarcoat it. You have been a safety net for so long that Brandon forgot how to walk on his own. You thought you were being a good mother by removing every obstacle from his path, but all you did was make him weak, and worse. You made him feel entitled to your life. I looked down at my coffee. I just wanted him to have the things I did not have, I whispered. I know, Barb said. She reached across the table and patted my hand. We all do. My own son did not speak to me for 3 months because I refused to lend him money for a truck he did not need. 3 months of silence. It nearly killed me. But you know what happened? He eventually found a way to buy that truck himself, and when he did, he respected himself more. And he respected me more, too. But he changed the locks, Barb, I said. The hurt was still fresh. He locked me out of their lives, because he knew that was the only power he had over you, Barb replied. He could not control your money anymore, so he tried to control your heart. It is a tactic, Evelyn. It is a mean, desperate tactic, but it only works if you let it. We sat there for a while, just being quiet together. Barb told me about the new reading curriculum at the school, and about the woman down the street who had turned her entire front lawn into a wildflower meadow. We talked about things that had nothing to do with Brandon. It was a reminder that my world was bigger than one ungrateful son. Before she left, Barb stood in the doorway and looked at me. Do not apologize, Evelyn. Not for the surgery, not for the money, and certainly not for finally standing up for yourself. If he comes back, and he will, make sure he comes back on your terms, not his. I watched her drive away. After she left, I did not feel as lonely. I went to the kitchen sink and started washing the coffee mugs. I looked at my reflection in the window. I looked tired, but I also looked resolved. I was 6 days away from my surgery. 6 days away from seeing the world clearly again. And I realized I was already starting to see things much better than I had in years. That night, for the first time since the space began, I slept through the entire night. I did not dream of locks or bank statements. I dreamed of the ocean and the way the light looks when it hits the water just right. Sunday evening is usually the hardest time for me. It is the time of week when the house feels the most empty. In the old days, before the locks were changed, Sunday was the day Brandon and Sarah would bring the boys over for dinner. The kitchen would be loud. There would be toy trucks on the floor, and the smell of roasting chicken in the air. But this Sunday, there was only silence. I was sitting in my armchair by the window, watching the shadows stretch across the lawn. I had not heard from Brandon or Sarah in 5 days. The space they wanted was a vast, cold ocean between us. I found myself looking at my phone more than I wanted to admit. I was waiting for an apology. I was waiting for a sign that they missed me more than they missed my money. Then, the phone buzzed. It was a missed call from Sarah's phone. I had not even heard it ring. There was a notification for a new voicemail. My heart did a strange little dance in my chest. I hesitated. I wondered if there would be more anger, more accusations. But when I pressed play, my breath caught in my throat. It was not Sarah. It was Jackson. His voice was very quiet, almost a whisper. I could hear the sound of a television in the background, and the faint muffled sound of his parents talking in another room. He sounded like he was hiding under a blanket. "Grandma," he said. "It is me, Jackson. Daddy has been really quiet, and Mommy keeps closing her bedroom door. I do not really know what is happening, but I miss you. I miss your house, and I miss when we make pancakes together. Can I come over soon? Even if it is not a special day?" He said that last part so softly, I had to play it back twice. Even if it is not a special day. I sat there in the dark. The phone pressed against my collarbone. I felt a tear roll down my cheek. This was the weapon Brandon was using. He was using the love of a 5-year-old boy to try to break me. He knew that Jackson was my heart. He knew that I would do anything for those boys. He was hoping the sound of Jackson's sadness would make me pick up the phone, apologize, and turn the money back on. I wanted to call him back immediately. I wanted to tell him that Grandma was coming to get him. I wanted to tell him that we would make a mountain of blueberry pancakes and everything would be fine. But then, I thought about the locks. I thought about the $4,500 taken from my account. I thought about the way Brandon had stood on that porch and let me walk away without a word. If I gave in now, what was I teaching Jackson? I would be teaching him that love is something you use to get what you want. I would be teaching him that it is okay to treat people like objects as long as you say you miss them later. I took a deep breath and opened the small notebook I keep by the phone. I wrote down his name. Jackson. Pancakes. I saved the voicemail, locking it so it would never be deleted. "I love you, Jackson," I whispered to the empty room. "And because I love you, I have to stay strong. I have to be a person you can respect when you grow up." I did not call back that night. It was the hardest thing I have ever done. Harder even than saying no to the money. But I realized that my love for my grandsons had to be separate from the toxicity of their parents. I had to protect myself so that one day, when the boys were older, I would still have a home and a life to share with them. The silence returned. But it felt different now. It felt like a shield. I was not just a grandmother. I was a woman holding a line. The morning of April 22nd arrived with a soft, pale light. I woke up at 5 o'clock in the morning. I felt strangely calm. This was the day I had waited 8 months for. The day my son told me I was selfish for choosing. 2 years ago, when I had my hip replacement, I was terrified. Brandon had been too busy with a client meeting to drive me to my follow-up appointments. I remember sitting in the waiting room alone, feeling like a burden to the world. But this time, things were different. At exactly 6:30, my neighbor Nancy pulled into my driveway. Nancy is 72. She is a retired librarian with a wicked sense of humor and a heart made of solid gold. She did not ask me if I needed help. She simply told me she was taking me. "Are you ready, Evelyn?" she asked, as I climbed into her car. She had a travel mug of coffee in one hand and a thick mystery novel in the other. "I have my book. I have my caffeine. I am not leaving that waiting room until you are done." "Thank you, Nancy," I said. "I really appreciate this." "Do not thank me," she replied with a wave of her hand. "That is what real neighbors do. Now, let us get those eyes fixed, so you can see how handsome the mailman is." I laughed. It was the first time I had laughed in weeks. The Duke Eye Center was bright and busy. The nurses were kind. They spoke in those soft, soothing voices that healthcare workers use. I was wheeled into the surgical suite. I remember the smell of antiseptic and the cool feeling of the numbing drops. The surgeon, a young man with a very steady hand, told me to look at the light. The procedure itself was quick. There was no pain, just a strange pressure and a kaleidoscope of colors. And then it was over. When I came out, I had a clear plastic shield taped over my eye. Nancy was right there, just like she promised. She helped me into the car. She stopped at the pharmacy to pick up my drops. She even went inside a Starbucks to get me a decaf latte. "The boys called?" she asked as we drove home. "No," I said. Brandon sent a text. He just said, "Hope the surgery went okay." I told him thank you. "That is it?" Nancy shook her head. "Well, his loss. You have me. And you have Martha. And you have your own strength." When I got home, Nancy helped me into my armchair. She made sure I had my water and my phone within reach. She stayed for an hour, just chatting about nothing in particular, until she was sure I was comfortable. That afternoon, I sat by the window. I had to keep the shield on, and everything was a bit blurry. But as the hours passed, the light started to change. I watched the sun set over the North Carolina pines. For the first time in years, the world did not look like it was covered in a grey fog. The recovery was exactly as the doctor had described. For the first few days, I had to be careful. 4 times a day, I would tilt my head back and put in the drops. 1, 2, 3, 4. I counted them out loud. It was a ritual of self-care. By the 4th day, the blurriness began to lift. It was like a veil was being pulled back. I looked out at my garden. I could see the individual leaves on the oak tree. I could see the vibrant red of a cardinal sitting on the fence Robert had built so many years ago. I realized then that the surgery had done more than just fix my physical sight. It had given me a new vision for my life. As the world became clearer, so did my understanding of my relationship with Brandon. I could see the patterns of manipulation now. I could see how I had allowed myself to be used. I looked at the drawing Jackson had made for me months ago. The one pinned to my fridge with a maple leaf magnet. I could see the colors more brightly now. I could see the effort he had put into every stroke of the crayon. I was 68 years old, and for the first time in my life, I was seeing things exactly as they were. No filters, no excuses, no fog. I picked up my legal pad and started to write. Not a letter to Brandon. Not a list of expenses. I started to write a list of things I wanted to do for myself. I wanted to take a trip to Boston to see Claire. I wanted to visit the botanical gardens. I wanted to sit in my garden and read a book without straining my eyes. I was no longer just a safety net. I was Evelyn, and my life was just beginning to come into focus. May arrived in North Carolina with a burst of color. The azaleas were blooming in shades of pink and white, and the air finally lost that sharp winter chill. It was a Wednesday afternoon, early in the month, when Brandon called again. He sounded tired. Not the fake, performative tired he used when he wanted something, but a real, bone-deep exhaustion. I listened as he told me about their new routine. He was working extra hours to cover the car loan. Sarah was picking up shifts on the weekends. They were finally seeing the true cost of the life they had built. "Mom," he said. His voice was quiet. "I want to talk about the babysitting. And I know about the money, the line of credit." He paused for a long time. I could hear a bird chirping in the background. "I should have asked you, Mom. I am sorry." I stood in my kitchen, looking at the garden I had worked so hard to maintain. "I appreciate you saying that, Brandon," I replied. "I really do. Can we find a way to fix this?" he asked. "I would like that," I said. "But I need to be very honest with you. Some things have changed for good. I have made permanent changes to my will and to my power of attorney. I have stopped the monthly transfers. Those decisions are final." I am not going to explain every detail, but I need you to understand that the old way of doing things is over. There was a long silence. I did not rush to fill it. Finally, he spoke. Okay, he said. Just that one word. Okay. I also want to be clear about something else, I continued. I gripped the phone a little tighter. I am your mother. I love your children. I want to be part of their lives, but I will no longer be available on demand. I will not apologize for having medical appointments. If we are going to find our way back to each other, it starts with respect. Not just for my money, but for my time and my health. We talked for 20 minutes after that. We talked about small things. We talked about Jackson's end-of-year school concert. We talked about whether Leo was finally sleeping through the night. We talked about the potholes on their street that the city was finally promising to fix. It was a careful conversation. It was a little bit awkward, like two people trying to walk on ice and making sure it does not break. A week later, on a beautiful Saturday morning, a car pulled up to my curb. It was Sarah's car. I watched through the window as Jackson climbed out of the back seat. He had his little blue backpack on his shoulders. Sarah stayed in the driver's seat. When I looked out, she lifted her hand. It was not exactly a wave. It was more of an acknowledgement, a sign that she understood the new rules. Then she drove away. Jackson was standing on my front step. He was holding a piece of paper in his fist, folded in half. Before I could even say hello, he held it out to me. I made it at school, Grandma, he said. His eyes were wide and bright. My teacher told us to draw someone important, someone who is a hero to us. And I drew you. I took the paper and unfolded it carefully. It was a drawing of a house. My house. He had drawn the blue door and the rose bushes along the fence. There were two figures in front of the house, holding hands. One was very small, and one was tall. Underneath, in his messy, beautiful, 5-year-old printing, he had written our names. Jackson, Grandma. I looked at that drawing for a long time. I felt a warmth in my chest that had nothing to do with the May sun. Come in, Jackson, I said. I reached out and took his hand. Let us go to the kitchen. I think it is time for some pancakes. He kicked off his shoes at the door and ran to the kitchen. I heard him climb onto his favorite stool. I heard the familiar scrape of the wood against the tile. It was the sound of home. Do we still have the blueberries, Grandma? He called out. We certainly do, I replied. That night, after Brandon had come to pick him up, I sat in my armchair by the window. The street was quiet. The light outside was soft and golden, the way it always is in North Carolina, just before the sun goes down. Nee had not erased anything. I had not forgotten the $82,000. I had not forgotten the changed locks, or the way I felt standing on that porch in the cold. I had not returned the money to his account, and I had not changed my will back. But I had not lost my family either. I had simply stopped disappearing. I had stopped leaving myself at the door so that everyone else could walk inside. I realized that setting a boundary was not an act of hate. It was an act of survival. By demanding respect for myself, I was teaching my son how to be a man. And I was teaching my grandson what it looks like to be a person of value. I looked at the drawing of Jackson and me, now pinned to the fridge with my maple leaf magnet. We were standing together, clear and bright. I am 68 years old. My vision is clear. My heart is full. And for the first time in 34 years, I am not just a mother or a grandmother. I am Evelyn. And that is more than enough. I want to thank you for staying with me until the very end. This story, it was not just about a surgery or a bank account. It was about something much deeper. It was about the moment we realized that our time, our health, and our peace of mind have value. For 34 years, I thought that being a good mother meant disappearing. I thought that if I did not say yes to every request, If I did not hand over every dollar, then I was failing. But standing on that porch, looking at a lock that my own son had changed, I finally understood. You cannot buy love, and you certainly cannot keep a family together by letting yourself be treated like a resource instead of a human being. Today, my vision is clear. Not just because of the doctors at the Eye Institute, but because I finally stopped making excuses for people who were only there when they needed something. I still love Brandon. I will always love my grandsons. But that love no longer comes at the cost of my own dignity. Before you leave today, I would love to hear from you. Many of you, out there, might be sitting in a quiet kitchen, just like mine. Perhaps you have faced a similar choice. Perhaps you have had to set a boundary that felt impossible at the time. Please, share your thoughts in the comments. And if you have not already, let us know which part of the country you are watching from. Whether you are in a small town in Georgia or a busy city in California, it is an honor to have you here. If this story resonated with you, please consider staying a while. Subscribe to our channel and join our community. We share stories like this every week, stories that remind us that we are never too old to start a new chapter. I am Evelyn. I am 68 years old, and I am finally, truly, living my own life. Take care of yourselves. Watch out for one another. And remember, it is never selfish to take care of the person you see in the mirror. I will see you in the next story.